بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Please excuse me for the delay in the class. Sometimes I get lost with time and end up infringing on things I meant to do. So please pardon my shortcomings, inshallah ta'ala. So we were talking, and this is an important sidetrack. What we're doing is because I'm kind of mapping out a course for us and how we should learn. And if we master these issues, we understand them well, it will facilitate for us to do the work we need to do, right? The one who does not know a value of a thing will not take it seriously, right? The one who does not know a value of a thing will not take it serious. So if we're trying to build as a community, as a nation, then we need to know the value of the tools we need to build. You have to take care of the tools. You're not going to achieve your objective without the tools that are necessary to do the work. You know, so take care of your tools. I know one of the things that can be extremely frustrating in the masjid is we buy all these tools, for maintenance. And then when we go to do work, and then work may come up at different times, not at the time you may have the tools that you brought them. You brought all the tools, so whatever work you need to done, you can do. And then when it's time to do the work, somebody borrowed the tool and didn't bring it back. So now you don't have the tools to do the work. And they didn't bring it back because they didn't realize the value of that tool to the masjid. So they spoiled it. Now we can't reach our objectives, right? So translation, don't take no tools out the masjid. But likewise, the knowledge and the different sciences of the religion are tools for us to build this model community, right? That we talk about, that we desire, and all this unity and everything we romanticize it with. The knowledge of the religion is an essential tool to achieve any of that. And if you don't learn properly and you don't know what is knowledge, then you don't have the right tools. It's like using the wrong screwdriver to try to take out a screw. It's not going to work. You need the right to fit in, to turn. If you're putting the wrong one in there, it's not going to turn. It's not even going to go in. So knowing what knowledge is, knowing how to acquire knowledge, knowing the types of knowledge, knowing who are the people of knowledge. All that's essential for us to learn. So be patient while we take this little curve and come back to our regularly studied books that we're doing, but this is important. So we were talking about al-mujtahid and al-ijtihad, right? We want to identify what are the types of people we want to learn from, whom we take the knowledge from. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So the first question we should ask ourselves, مَنْ هُمْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ أهل الذكر, who are the people of knowledge, the people of remembrance? Men who are they? That we should take our religion from them. So in this context, we're talking about al-mujtahidun, those qualified legal scholars. And I know all this terminology may be foreign to some of us, so I'm going to put it. Al-mujtahidun. They are the scholars who we take the rules of the religion from. And everyone other than them are narrating from them back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's very important to understand. In the deen of Islam, we have a hierarchy in terms of how we learn. There are levels. The ultimate level is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then his companions who took the knowledge directly from him, and those who followed them until it reached those great imams who are al-mujtahidun, those qualified to give expert Islamic legal opinion. And from them, there are levels under them at the level of giving expert legal opinion. And then there's the common people among them who are learned jurists, scholars in different fields, and the common people. So we should look at it like that. The common person cannot skip steps to make legal judgments. That would be a crime. So the common people are going to have most likely recourse to learned people who have knowledge. They've learned matters of the religion, but they didn't reach the level of al-ijtihad, which is expert legal opinion, right? They didn't reach that level because it has qualifications. But they do know matters of the religion. They know their personal obligatory knowledge. They know some communal knowledge. They've studied some books. They've taken knowledge from scholars, and they know where the resources are in the works of al-mujtahidun and those under those absolute mujtahids. So the common person usually learning from them. Those people are having recourse to the different levels of the mujtahidun through their works that have been transmitted to us. And those mujtahidun, they have their direct connection to the followers, the companions, and ultimately to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all this is done with an unbroken chain of narration through scholars and books. It's extremely important that you understand that. If you understand that this is how we learn our religion, then I would like to say 90% of your issue is solved. The other 10% relates to strengthening your faith by following what you know. But as far as how to do it, that's there. You got it. Now fix yourself to comply with what you know, which is a matter of iman, a matter of faith, its strength or its weakness. So one needs to perform in accordance to what you know to strengthen your faith, so your religious practice would be complete. Is this point clear, like these steps that I'm telling you about? Because it's not the steps to how many of us are learning in our communities. We take laymen for scholars, which is a problem. We take laymen for scholars, and that's a problem. It's the wrong tool. It's not going to work, right? Let's put that up. We must not confuse laymen with scholars. Can we put that up? I'm going to say 2 points that I just want to highlight in our mind, like can be like sayings we keep that remind us. We must not confuse laymen with scholars. All right. I'm going to be good, right? So we must not confuse laymen with scholars. Can everyone copy that? Fatima, you got it? Right. All right. Can we all copy that? I'm going to be nice this morning. I'm not going to have no fun. It's going to kill me not to have no fun, but I'm gonna pass on the jokes. Yeah, I'm going to hold on the jokes. I had a good one, but I'm going to leave it out. Just for you, right up your alley, but I'm going to leave it out. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, Muawi, I had one for. I was getting ready to pow, but I'm going to leave it alone. Okay. Now, that's something we're going to keep as a rule for us. We must not confuse laymen with scholars. In order not to do that, you have to know what a scholar is and you have to know what a layman is. If you don't know what a scholar is and you don't know what a layman is, you're going to confuse them all the time. So in order not to confuse laymen with scholars, then we must learn first what a scholar is. Because once we know what a scholar is, then we know the other people are laymen and we'll never confuse them. Right? So in our terms, which we talked about yesterday, hold on 1 second, please. So we must not, so once we distinguish the scholar and the layman, then we can proceed properly into that, not confusing them. In our context, when we say scholar, In our context, for rules, we're talking about someone at the level of al-ijtihad, right? That's what we're referring to in the context of who we refer to as the scholars whom we're going to take the rules from, right? Everyone who's not at that level is a narrator or a conveyor. And when they teach us, if we're learning, they're going to be relating from the people of ijtihad. Is that clear? So they are laymen, even if they have knowledge. They are laymen, and they are conveying to us what the mujtahidun said. So they are like a bridge between the complete layman and the mujtahidun at the various levels of ijtihad. So not necessarily only the absolute mujtahid. No, any of the people of ijtihad at different levels, which we'll talk about, they're relating from them. Is this clear? Everybody with me? Any questions so far for anything that's not clear? Am I frozen? Reader, can they hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So now we're going to talk about the conditions of the judge. And the judge normally, under good situations, would be qualified in a level of ijtihad in some cases. So he's the lowest level of that, right? So we're going to talk about just his qualifications. And then what is above him in terms of the levels of those mujtahid scholars is an increase of what he needs to know. And if we're talking about the absolute mujtahid, he needs to know all this stuff in every aspect of the sacred law, right? So let's go to page 625. 0.022.0 section D. Are you ready, reader?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The
So,
author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, the judge and the court. The necessary qualifications for being an Islamic judge, qadi, are A. To be a male freeman. B. To have full capacity for moral answerability, taklif. C. To be upright. D. To possess knowledge.
so now we're just talking about the knowledge. To give an idea what the one who's going to give legal judgments, an idea, this is not all. And we're talking about the lowest level of that, what he needs to know. Go ahead. And this is a summary, not an exhaustive list. But the summary will give you an idea to the details.
To possess knowledge, per Sheikh Umar Barakat, of the rulings of sacred law, meaning by way of personal legal reasoning, ijtihad,
Go ahead.
from primary text, not merely by following a particular qualified scholar, taqlid,
Go ahead.
i.e., If he follows qualified scholarship, he must know and agree with how the rulings are derived, not merely report them.
All right.
Being qualified.
Stop. So we talked about this person is going to be qualified to know the rulings of al-ahkam al-shar'iyya, to know the rulings of Islam, the legal judgments of the religion, by way of al-ijtihad, right? From the himself, from the primary text of the Quran, the Sunnah, al-ijma, and al-qiyas, and its various aspects. So the primary sources from which that person is going to make his ijtihad, all of these sources are four, right? From Al-Quran, As-Sunnah, Al-Ijma, and Al-Qiyas, right? So they're the four sources. So this will dispel the notion that is spread among laymen, which is a false notion, that we only follow the Quran and Sunnah. That is not enough for that scholar to do his function. There are more than the sources of the Quran and Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah are the primary sources of the main source of the sources of the law, but not the only sources. So they're not the only tools that's in the toolbox of the mujtahid. That's a whole nother discussion, Sister Malika, that we won't go into now. There are reasons why that exists, and we'll talk about that at a whole nother time. But like, I'll say this so you'll understand: in legal rulings in Islam, the male and the female are not the same. And the legal rulings distinguish between men and women. I'll give you an example. Why, to give you an example, I won't go in details. Why is the man obligated to make Jumu'ah and the woman is not? So in the rulings, sometimes there are differences that are lighter for the women, stricter for the men. Stricter for the men, lighter for the women, right? But that's an entire different discussion, if you follow me. But even when we talk about the knowledge, the woman who's going to be a mujtahid, even if she's not a judge, still has to have this knowledge. So the knowledge is what we're talking about, not the legal position of the person, right? Go ahead.
Being qualified to perform legal reasoning, ijtihad, requires knowledge of the rules and principles of the Quran, the Sunnah, per Abdul Wakil Durubi, in this context, meaning the Hadith, not the Sunnah as opposed to the obligatory. Per New Ali Salman, as well as knowledge of scholarly consensus, ijma, defined B7, and analogy, defined in section 3 below.
So if you
Together,
highlight that and able to be qualified for what we're talking about, from whom we're going to take legal rulings and they're going to be binding on us, that's going to come from someone who's qualified to ijtihad. And the one who does that must know and agree with how rulings are derived from the Quran, the Sunnah, al-Ijma, and al-Qiyas. Without that knowledge, the person is not even qualified to do ijtihad. Hence, they're not qualified to issue legal verdicts. They only can report them. Do y'all understand the difference from issuing something and reporting something? Are y'all following me here? Issuing means you're making the judgment based on your own knowledge. Reporting is you're conveying what those qualified people said and you're saying this came from them, which is actually a taqleed, that is following qualified scholarship. So either you're at the level of deducing legal rulings or you're following qualified scholarship. The laymen must follow qualified scholarship. They cannot independently deduce legal rulings. They're not qualified. So one of the points Sheikh Nisar made yesterday, which is really happening, when we don't understand these qualifications, we don't have one madhab, one or two or three or four valid madhabs. We have hundreds of unqualified, invalid madhabs. And that's what we see today. Everyone makes up his rules as he goes along based on his own fancy whims. I think no one asks you to think. You're not qualified to think on legal rulings. I know that sounds cruel, but it's true. I think no one asks you to think. That's not your position when it comes to legal rulings. You to follow and report. That's what you do. Don't think. That's the problem. You keep thinking without the qualifications that help you think. You don't have tools. By way of analogy, if I come into your house and you have some electrical problems, you're not going to let me say, I think this is what we should do. You're going to say, no, I think we need to call a professional. Right? And I think you need to stop thinking about how to fix this electric. Similarly, right? Go ahead.
Together with knowing the types of each of these. Per
Now,
Darubi,
so the general is you need knowledge of the Quran and its principles, knowledge of the Sunnah, the Ahadith of the Prophet and its principles, knowledge of al-ijma and the principles, and knowledge of al-qiyas and its principles, and then the various types related to each of those areas, right? And he's going to talk about that in a brief way. So it's not just saying Quran and Sunnah, but you need to know about the Quran and its principles and all the types of verses and how they correspond or relate to one another. The Hadith and all the types of Hadith, everything about that and how it relates to one another and how it relates to the Quran and consensus and the types of consensus and who's qualified to be looked forward towards in consensus. And then the types of analogy and how many types of analogy are there and when do we use them and how do we use them? All that is what that scholar needs. Go ahead.
per Darubi, the knowledge of each type below implies familiarity with subtypes and kinds, but the commentator has deemed the mention of the category as a whole sufficient to give readers a general idea.
And as I told
Number
you
one.
yesterday, all of this knowledge is introduced and expounded upon in the books of Usul al-Fiqh, the books of the foundations of Islamic jurisprudence. And as I told you, you have a general way, and then you have usul in each school of thought. So you have a general rulings, and then in each school, they have their own usul. So the one who would really be making the claim of, I'm following Quran and Sunnah, claims they know all this stuff. And there's no need for it, which means you're a super scholar. And a 5-minute test will show you you're not. It doesn't even take 5 minutes. Our teachers taught us how to discover a scholar in 5 minutes. Or not discover, discount someone from being a scholar in 5 minutes. And it actually works. It does. They taught us in 5 minutes how you will discover a person is not a scholar. It's not hard. In 5 minutes, boom, you're not a scholar. Stop. You're a common person. And that doesn't mean you don't have knowledge. We're just saying you're not qualified to deduce legal rulings, right? You may be smart and you may be knowledgeable and we may can benefit you, but the claim of scholarship and the claim of following you independently is false. Don't say that. That's not your area. It's very easy. Go ahead.
The types of Quranic rules include, for example, number 1, those of general applicability to different types of legal rulings. Number 2, those khas applicable to only one particular ruling or type of ruling. Number 3, those mujmal, which require details and explanation in order to be properly understood. Number 4, those mubayyin, which are plain without added details. Number 5, those mutlaq, applicable without restriction. Number 6, those muqayyad, which have restrictions. Number 7, those nas, which unequivocally decide a particular legal question. Number 8, those zahir, with a probable legal signification, but which may also bear an alternative interpretation. Number 9, those nasif, which supersede previously revealed Quranic verses. Number 10, and those mansukh, which are superseded by later verses.
Mm-hmm.
The types of sunnah.
This talking about the Quranic verses. We're on page 626, Isa. This talking about just the Quran. Stuff you need to know about the Quran, right? Let's just talk about the Quran. And then, in addition to these types, you have to know which hadith, which verses apply to rulings and which are not. You have to distinguish between ayatul ahkam, verses that relate to rulings, and verses that don't. And you don't try to extract rulings from the wrong verses. So that's another part of it. Go ahead. So that's with the Quran. So if a person is talking, and we just discussed these, and they go, what are you talking about? Okay, you're not qualified. Right? If you don't know when a verse is general and what that means, or specific, right? Or if it is a verse that needs extra explanation, or it is clear in and of itself, right? If it is absolute or it's restricted, if it's abrogated or an abrogating, if you can't know even what that is, let alone what types of verses are like that, you're not qualified. So some of these ways are easy, like to just discount, right? That means you are muqallid. You have to follow someone who knows that, right? Go ahead. Now the sunnah.
Roman number 2, the types of sunnah per Durubi, i.e. hadith, include number 1, hadiths, mutawatir, related by whole groups of individuals.
And these are the
whole
types
groups
of hadith. This has nothing to do with knowing from where we get the hadith, the sources, the books, the scholars, who they are, all that. You have to know that too before we even talk about the types, right? You have to know actually the sources. Where are the hadith contained? Which, if we're just purely speaking in English, we don't have enough books translated to independently even get into this, because the books are not translated in English. The amount that we need. There is some translations and a whole lot, but not enough. Not to do this job. For reading and benefiting, yes. But to make legal rulings, there's not enough. You don't have enough access. Go ahead.
Related by whole groups of individuals from whole groups and multiple contiguous channels of transmission leading back to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace, such that the sheer number of separate channels at each stage of transmission is too many for it to be possible for all to have conspired to fabricate the hadith, per Darubi, which is thereby obligatory to believe in, and denial of which is unbelief, kufr.
In order to know that a hadith is mutawatir, you have to know the number of routes by which that hadith has reached us. And you cannot just look in even the 6 books to know that a hadith is mutawatir, right? Because there's other narrations, right? So the vastness of your knowledge of hadith is very important. Go ahead.
Number 2, hadiths, ahad, related by fewer than the above-mentioned group at one or more stages of the transmission, though traced through contiguous successive narrators back to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace. If a hadith is transmitted through just one individual at any point in the history of its transmission, the hadith is termed singular, gharib. If it is transmitted through just 2 people at any stage of its transmission, it is termed rare, aziz. If its channels of transmission come through only 3 people at any point of its history, it is termed well-known, mashhur. These designations do not directly influence the authenticity rating of the hadith, since a singular hadith, for example, might be rigorously authenticated, sahih, well authenticated, hasan. Hadiths of both types being obligatory for a Muslim to believe in, though someone who denies them is merely considered corrupt, fasiq, not an unbeliever, kafir, or not well authenticated, da'if, depending on the reliability ratings of the narrators and other factors weighed and judged by hadith specialists.
And so here, the other aspect is you have to be aware, which many people who claim to follow Quran and Sunnah have no clue about. You have to be aware of the chains of narration of hadith, because they're going to determine how those hadith are used in legal rulings. But if you have no knowledge of that, no access to that, you cannot make legal rulings, because you don't even know how the report reached you. And it's not just, I found it in the book published by the book company. Companies make mistakes. They're businesses. They're not concerned about accuracy. The publishing company don't care about accuracy. They care about selling books. And I know this from being in the Arab world. They vicious with inaccuracy of reporting. The person who's doing it is some kid. He got a summertime job putting books together. He doesn't care. So if it come off the printer wrong, if the kid playing on the computer sometimes makes a mistake, no one cares. Print. The book fair is tomorrow. Print. They'll figure it out on the other end. And that's what's in your hand, a book full of mistakes. And you don't have no teacher to correct those mistakes who had knowledge from learning those books directly with a teacher. Now what? So now you're making a legal judgment based on the printing errors of some money hunger book printers. Do y'all get that picture? Is that a religious disaster or what? I remember in one printing company in Beirut, I went to where they print the books. Do you know the workers were standing on top of the books? Lifting stuff up, moving, stacking books up, religious books, standing on them. These are the people we're relying on to learn our religion. Are you kidding me? Going into the editing department, a bunch of young kids on computers who can't even read that great, editing books. It can't be serious, right? Come on. And the bosses, none of them are religious people. They just making money. They just making money. Then the funny thing, you'll see people giving classes with a nice bookshelf in the back with all these fancy books printed by those people. So why you got those books back there? Because I know they full of mistakes. Full of them. And I know firsthand this. I'm not like narrating. This is firsthand eyesight. Like, oh, I don't believe they're doing this. Firsthand. So all this is extremely important when we're talking about our religion, because people in the business and they don't mind cheating. They don't care at all. This is about the bottom line. We got to get some money. They don't even have good editing practices. They just print. No one is saying, oh, let's proofread, let's make sure that it ain't. I mean, obvious mistakes. If anyone read this, they would have picked this up. That means no one is editing. Like, it ain't like a mistake. Anyone can make a mistake. Now I'm talking about a bunch of them. And anyone who checked these books and read them would have caught these mistakes. That means you didn't check. Or you weren't thorough in your checking, which is just as bad as not checking at all. You're not thorough, so can't rely on you, right? That's just with that. So if the person is not familiar with those narrations, sometimes they're mixed all over the place, right? So this is a serious business when we're talking about the need of scholarship. Go ahead.
Number 3, and other kinds. Per translator, Yusuf Ardabili mentions the following in his list of qualifications for performing legal reasoning, ijtihad. Number 4, hadiths mursal, from one of those tabi'i who had personally met, per Ali Salman, not only met but actually studied under one or more of the prophetic companions, Sahaba, but not the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace. Hadith reported in the form, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said or did such and such, without mentioning the companion who related it directly from the Prophet.
So this will tell you something too. You have to know the narrators in the chain. Not only have the chain, but you got to know the people to know who's who, right? Right? Who's who? I was talking to someone the other day. Somebody presented a chain of narration. I said, that's not a proof. He said, what do you mean? I said, who are the people in the chain? You showing me a chain, and all the people in the chain, you don't know none of them. And it's all mixed up at that. The chain itself is an obvious perversion, fabrication, and you didn't even notice that. You didn't even look at the chain to notice that the chain itself is a fabrication, obvious. Anyone who knows anything about chains of narration know this is impossible, the way you wrote it. It doesn't even match how chains of narration are conveyed. It is like, that's totally unscholarly. If you just look at it, that's from observer standpoint. When you hone in, it get worse. This the level, the levels of the chain don't make sense. And you're bragging like I have a chain of narration. This is a mess. It's not a chain of narration. This is a grievous fabrication. But if a person is not aware of these things, then you can pass them any old thing. So the person has to know those men, not just have names and cut and paste. Oh, and not know who's who, not even know if these people really met or if they really existed. No check, no thoroughness. And pass that off as knowledge. Stop. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. That was me venting.
Number 5, hadiths musnad, related through a contiguous series of transmitters back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace. Number 6, hadiths muttasil, related through a contiguous series of transmitters, either from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah Ta'ala give him peace, bless him and give him peace, such a hadith being termed ascribed marfu, or else only from one of the companions, such a hadith being termed arrested mawquf. Number 7, hadiths munqata, related through a chain of transmitters of whom one is unknown. Per the translator, though if 2 or more are unknown, it is not considered merely incontiguous, munqata, but rather problematic, mubdal. Number 8, the positive and negative personal factors, determining the reliability ratings of the individual narrators of a hadith channel of transmission.
So besides knowing the narrators, you got to know their strengths and weaknesses. So not only knowing who the person is, that's one issue. Then you have to know their scholarly strengths and weaknesses, and how that affects in their reporting, in their conveying, in their reliability, in their trustworthiness, in their accuracy. All that needs to be known too, about every single narrator. The one who's given those legal judgments must know that independently, not by narrating from someone else. Other than that, that person is a follower and they need to relate from the people of the field. Go ahead.
Number 9, the positions held by the most learned of the companions, Sahaba, on legal questions, and those of the scholars who came after them.
So, not only knowing about the hadith of the Prophet, but you also have to know the legal rulings of the companions, because they actually witnessed the Prophet ﷺ, lived with the Prophet ﷺ, and they were giving the instructions of how to apply those rulings. So they made legal judgments, and those legal judgments have significance, and you have to know them.
Number 10, and on which of these positions there is scholarly consensus, defined at B7, and which are differed upon.
So that you don't contradict scholarly consensus, right? And you need to independently know all this stuff. Now, let's read that last point and we'll stop.
Per translator, the English glosses and remarks on the meanings of the above hadith terminology are from notes taken by the translator at a lesson with hadith specialist Sheikh Shuaib Arnaout.
Right. Let's So we just talk about the Quran and Sunnah because we don't need to. We got that point, right? Do I think we all got the point, at least in relation to us? Do we all got the point why we need to follow a madhab? Why we need to follow qualified scholarship? Why we can't make our own scholars just because we want to feel good about ourselves? Do we got the point? I mean, is this like abundantly clear? Even though it's the fad and the trend in our time, I follow Quran and Sunnah, and I follow the strongest opinion. Would you stop? You don't even know what an opinion is, right? I'm sometimes, I come from the inner city, right? So we have a certain nature. Like, our young kids, they say, man, that's cap, right? Like, he's capping or whatever they say. You can't just tell us any old daggone thing. We're not going to accept, right? That's cap. Come on, man, stop, right? That's what we be doing. That's what that whole Wahhabi doctrine got us doing. Made a bunch of fake would-be mujtahids for everybody. So you listen to a person who obviously don't even have the basics of any of this stuff talking about where's your dalil. You don't even know what a dalil is. What are you talking about? Where's your dalil? You don't know what a dalil is. You don't even know how to arrive at a dalil. You wouldn't know a dalil if it smacked you in the face. That's being sarcastic, right? But it's true. All this is part of a dalil. To know these things is because when you say something's a dalil, that means it's an evidence for a legal ruling. That's what you're saying. And in order to know that that's an evidence for a legal ruling, there are other things you must know about that hadith or that verse you're using. Not just that you quoted a verse or a hadith. That in and of itself is not an evidence for anything, except, not even that, except that it's possibly a verse of the Quran and it's possibly a statement of the Prophet. And that has to be verified. Do you understand my point? Because sometimes the person is not even saying the verse right. Sometimes the person is quoting the Quran wrong. So it's not even a verse you're talking about. Allah said in the Quran what? And then that person's saying, and that's why in our context, some translation that they misinterpreted. So that ain't even the Quran. What are you talking about? It's not an evidence. Allah said in the Quran, he got a hand. Allah never said that in the Quran. Never used those words ever. What are you talking about? He rose above the throne. Where did you get that from? That's nowhere in the Quran. So that's not a proof for what you, because you're using the proof. Allah said in the Quran, he has a hand. Allah never said in the Quran, he has a hand. Allah said, Yad Allahi fawqa aydihim. That's a different story than saying hand. It's two different things. Because what you intend from the word hand, which you're trying to use as a proof that Allah literally has a hand, you're using that English translation and applying that to the words of Allah, and the words of Allah don't bear the same meaning as your English translation. Did you ever think about that? That's not even the Quran you're talking about. But you're using it as a proof. So you're not talking about what Allah said, you're talking about what that English translator translated. And then you're interpreting that translation to mean literal, which the Arabic doesn't even bear that. It's well known that it doesn't bear that meaning. The meaning you're trying to get, and you're using that as an evidence. And likewise with the hadith, so we're talking evidence All that stuff is in need. And we're only mentioning this. Those great mujtahid scholars did all that work. All what we're talking about, they were qualified to do that. And that's why we follow them. And that's not blind following. They were seeing very well. We're the one doing the blind following our desires. That's the real blind following, the blind following of our desires. With no expertise, no qualification, no standard, just go for it. And this is a means of destroying our religion without even realizing it. To the point that scholarship is irrelevant in our daily lives and activities, and that's an error. I'll stop here. If anyone has any questions, I think this point is kind of clear. We have one more thing that we need to cover tomorrow. And then in general, I think the point is well understood. Unless you have a question, that something that's not clear. Any questions, statements, comments? Tonight, Sheikh Yahya Baltimore will continue in his classes at 7:30. Everybody want to be the man, Jessica. And listen, when you is a mufti a lay person? What we call a mufti today, yes, they lay people. They may have knowledge, but a real mufti is that. That's a real mufti. None of them are real muftis. In our time, you hear the word mufti so-and-so. That's someone who studied some course like Sheikh Nisar was talking about. They become muftis after they finish his courses like that. I mean, that's not a real mufti when we're in the context we're talking about. I mean, it's laughable, but today they just grant titles, Sheikh, Mufti, Maulana, Al-Alama to anybody. But in real study, no. They're lay persons, yes. The ones that we're calling Mufti today are laymen. I'll tell you, one of the great scholars from Jordan, he's one of the teachers of the translator. When you see that book, Big N, his name is Sheikh Nur Ali Salman, rahimahullah. He said he gave exams to some people who wanted to be judges. They all were doctors in sacred law, and they didn't even know the conditions and integrals and invalidators of the prayer and ablution. They were failing in those areas, but they wanted them to be judges. He said it was horrible. Like, they didn't even know ibadat, let alone legal rulings that's going to mess with somebody's lives. So the scale has been really lowered across the board. But for us, that's everybody's problem. But we just don't want to be deluded by that problem and realize that no, we do have to actually hit the books for everybody. With learned people who learn from scholars who hit the books. And all of us are going to end up in our time sticking to sticking to our tradition and knowing it well for our protection. Because you have a lot of things. You have business. I'm telling you, people's in business. and it became a business. So even when a person is not qualified, they won't say I'm not qualified. They're going to go for it because they want to protect their group. They want to protect their association. They want to protect their brand. And you know you ain't qualified. And you know you should be quoting and you should be conveying. You know what you should be doing, but you want to be the man or the woman. Stop. Yeah, Allah knows best. It's rough, not easy. But at least we aware. You know, the one who's aware is not like the one who's not unaware. He's still going to have his tests, but he's not going to have the same problem as the one who's totally unaware. At least he know what he's looking for. Can clear up your statement, teaching fiqh before usul of fiqh in the West. That didn't change. The usul al-fiqh will help you understand, for people who think they're mujtahidun, why they need to follow a madhab and follow fiqh. But fiqh, you must practice your religion. So you cannot spend your time without learning the rules, learning how the rules are derived. You have to learn the rules. So in the West, among us, because of the fitna of al-Wahhabiyya and al-Madhabiyya, not following schools of thought, people think they're mujtahids. So we got to teach them enough of usul al-fiqh to show you you're not a mujtahid, so you can follow and learn properly. So it's not an issue of teaching usul al-fiqh over fiqh, right? It's a matter of clarifying through usul al-fiqh why you need to follow fiqh properly by following a madhab. So giving you some points of that to push you to what you should be doing without even having to know that. Normally, you would go to a teacher, the teacher would teach you a madhab, and you would sit down and stop acting like you a sheikh and learn a madhab and practice your worship, learn all the rules, and then you go learn how the rules were derived. That's the normal traditional way. But in our arrogant society, everybody's a sheikh, even if you just took your shahada yesterday. So therefore, somebody got to teach you you're not a sheikh in order to let you learn how to become one. And even just to practice the basic religious practice. That's why so many people, they don't know what they're doing. They never learned. They don't follow a madhab. They came in the door, you're a mujtahid, meaning don't follow a madhab. No one told him if you don't follow a madhab, that means you got to make your own or follow minds, which it is. That's when I said yesterday, not following a madhab is a madhab. Some people that went over their heads. When I say not following a madhab is a madhab, that means you're not following a madhab. So you're doing something. Whatever you're doing, that's your madhab. Even if it's wrong, it is wrong. But that's your madhab. And whoever you listening to teach you the stuff you're learning, that's your imam of your madhab. So either you're following one of the four madhabs that are valid, four accepted by consensus, or you following your own madhab that is not accepted. Is it clear now what I mean? Not following a madhab is a madhab? If you're saying my chain, I'm nobody, I'm a layman. But I'll give you an example. If I take our chains that I rely on the most, we have multiple chains in different things. But let me give you an example. I'm a common person, right? Among the closest of my chains that we always rely on is my chains through my teacher, Sheikh Samir, right? Sheikh Samir is a scholar from Damascus, Syria, who teaches at the graduate level in Hanafi fiqh. He is also skilled in Shafi'i fiqh, right? He relates from many, but among the scholars he relates from, the main two, that he relates from his route, besides others, but the main two that he relates from, especially in the areas of hadith and his chains, are from one scholar who was in Mecca, Sheikh Muhammad Yasin al-Fadani, right? Sheikh Muhammad Yasin al-Fadani was a Shafi'i scholar in Mecca. In Usul al-Fiqh and Fiqh, he was Shafi'i, and he was a great scholar in hadith. And the other one is from the Morocco, who was in Egypt as well, Sheikh Abdullah al-Ghumari, who was a great master of fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and Maliki fiqh, as well as being aware of Shafi'i fiqh too. And then they have teachers up, and I can continue and continue, but so it ain't me. It's going to go to teachers who are qualified scholars. You follow my point? And in different areas for everything. That's how it goes. Like we relate from people who related from people, and we can go all the way back to the Prophet with all of that. And we know each and every one in the chain, right? That's what we were learned. That's how we were taught. That's not make us nobody, because we're laymen and we have to follow. That's why we're saying it like that. We're not scholars. We're laymen. We got some information. That doesn't mean you can't benefit. But to make the mistake, talk about we scholars and sheikhs and all this fancy stuff, it creates delusion in people. And it prevents them from actually learning from real trustworthy sources so they can practice their religion properly. And we can't do that. That's wrong. You don't have to be the man. You can help the man. That's fine, right? You don't always have to be it. You can follow it, you know? What will help us, what will protect us from making our teachers and sheikhs rock stars in our minds? Your teachers and sheikhs telling you they're not rock stars, right? You're never going to make me think I'm somebody, because I know I'm not. So no matter what you have in your mind, you're not going to fool me with that. I'm going to tell you, no, I'm not no sheikh. These are sheikhs. This is what a sheikh look like. I'm your brother in Islam. I may be your teacher. I may help you with some stuff, but I'm not no scholar. Let's not be fooled. I don't want to disrespect scholarship like that, right? So I'm going to teach you what I know, and then hopefully, if you master all that I have, then we're going to go to the next level in our learning and have recourse to the next till we get it. And then hopefully you learn enough. One day I'm sitting at your feet and you're the one teaching and I'm listening. I have no problem with that. I'd rather see that, right? I would rather see that. I would rather see you the sheikh. But you teaching correctly and you got the knowledge and you memorize. I'd sit in your class with no problem. No ego, no nothing. Take notes, question you, research with you. I would love it. So the sheikh and the teacher should help the student not think he's somebody he's not or she's not. That's the job of the teacher. Students naturally going to have respect for your teacher. You should feel in your mind like they're a rock star, like they benefited you, even if it's one letter. But don't take them beyond their level, right? There's nothing wrong with having veneration for your teacher. You should. If you didn't, something's blameworthy in that. But exaggerating, putting them more than they are, no. Right? No. Most definitely. Was Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda a muhaddith? Yes. My teachers were his direct students. And he was a great muhaddith. Yes. And Hanafi in fiqh. With all his knowledge of hadith, he followed the madhab. Right? With all his knowledge. And he was one of the foremost scholars in hadith. My sheikh was married to his daughter. And I used to be with my sheikh and his daughter speeding around the town. She would say to me when we get in the car, Amin, put on your seatbelt. This guy think we're going to play bumper cars. That's just an inside. She used to crack me up with that. His daughter Fatima. MashaAllah. May Allah protect her. She's funny. Yes, he was a great scholar of hadith. Tayyib. Any other questions? Is this all clear? And this is, listen, please don't misunderstand what we're talking about here. This is very important. We're not putting anyone down, right? We're not. Everyone has something to benefit us with. Just benefit with what you have, not what you don't have, right? Everyone can be a source of benefit. Just benefit with what you have. Don't claim what you don't have. That's the moral of the point for our religious safety. Everyone has something they can use to be a source of benefit. Benefit with what you have. Don't claim what you don't have. And then what you don't have recourse to the ones who have it. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. There's no blame in saying, I don't know. It's okay. Everybody don't know something. It's fine. Doesn't make you a bad person. So you don't have to act like you know something you don't know just so you can feel better about yourself. Everybody got some stuff they don't know. It's fine. Just learn what you don't know if it's needed. If it's needed, go acquire it from the person who has it. Tayyip, with that, we'll bring it to a close for today. We sure we don't have any more questions, right? Is it clear for everyone? I guess if you don't have questions, that means it's clear. Everyone understands we must follow a madhab. We must have qualified scholarship. And then when we don't know, we say we don't know, and we have recourse to that qualified scholarship. That's a good question. That's not a weird question because it's always a possibility. May Allah give us a long life, but we may not. It may be over. That's a good question. Here's my parting advice. Remain Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah according to the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in Aqidah are the Ash'a'ira and the Maturidiyah. Ahl Sunnah in Al-Fiqh are the Hanafis, Malikis, Shafis, Hanbalis. And Ahl Sunnah follow the way of a Tasawwuf. In all three of those sciences, find a trustworthy person, preferably a scholar. But if the scholar is not available, a trustworthy person who learned from scholars, who sticks diligently to those schools in those ways with an unbroken chain and reliable books according to each science, and every related sciences they learn in the same way. Bitalaqi, by learning from the words of a trustworthy teacher. Who learn from the words of a trustworthy teacher. That's my parting advice. And anyone who separates from that, stay away from like they got corona. And anyone who separates from what I just described, stay away from them like they got corona. Unless you're treating them. And make sure you have on your mask with a shield. And then treat them. Don't just leave them. If you have the ability to treat them, meaning teach them, put on your mask, put on your shield, and go ahead and teach them. But make sure you don't catch corona, if you get my analogy. That would be my parting advice. And that advice is never going to change, besides fearing Allah and applying all that. And guess what? I'm hated for that advice. I know it. By people who claim to believe the same thing. They don't like that advice. I have none of this stuff. None. Zero. Even if I'm the falling short myself, that advice is what I advise you. Even if I'm not good at applying it the way I would like myself, don't follow other than that. That's my advice. So I know there's a lot of imams and so-called sheikhs like, oh, he's zealous, he's dogmatic, he's you flip-flopping, and I ain't going for it. You need to do the same thing. You're not a scholar. You need to follow too. Now that hurts because people want to do their own thing. We can't afford to do it. It's destroying us. We need to go follow. And in our religious practice, I'm talking about. I ain't talking about your life. I'm talking about the rules of the religion. Don't alter them. Stick to the course. And if you're falling short, say you're falling short. Go get somebody to help pick you up. But stop altering our religion for your own desires. We can't afford it. It ain't about us. This is generational problems, right? So if we got a problem, we got to speak about it and we got to address it and we got to be diligent in addressing that problem. We got a problem of people altering the religion, unqualified people changing the rules of the religion. We have to stop that. The only way we're going to stop it is explicitly saying, this is the rules of the religion. This is how the religion is conveyed. These are the people who convey it. And you can't do that. That's wrong. If we don't do it, people are going to continue to do it. And it's going to be the norm like it is until we change it. Simple. I was watching the news this morning. May Allah give comfort to those who lost their loved ones in that shooting spree in Memphis yesterday. But the mayor, he said something. He said that the guy, the young brother, 19 years old, a young person, had just got out of jail like 6 months ago. He had a 3-year sentence and he got out like early or something like that. And then this same kid went on this crazy shooting spree. He may have mental issues. Allah knows best what's wrong with the person. But I'm quite sure somebody around him knew he was tripping and didn't say anything. It's highly unlikely that somebody was around this kid and didn't know he's tripping. Right? Do your thing, Sheikh Issa. Right? Somebody knew this kid's off of it and he need help. Or smelled the potential that this dude gonna do something dangerous. Somebody in the neighborhood knew this kid and didn't say anything. And now look. Somebody knew. Somebody knew he had weapons and he was acting stupid. Somebody knew that, but they didn't say anything. And now look. That's the same thing in our religious knowledge, but it's worse because we're talking about our hereafter, right? Same thing. And then we wonder why this is happening, because you're quiet. That's why it's happening. That's why it continues. You don't say nothing. And you know what's going on. So we have to take responsibility for our own conditions, right? We do have some say in the matter, right? We do. And we have to be responsible, right? We have a say in the religious matter. We can stop people altering the religious rules by sticking to the religious rules and adhering to it and telling people, no, that's wrong. This is the right way. And listen, you can make mistakes. No one's talking about a mistake. We're talking about deliberate, ongoing perversion, not mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. But if you come and you point my mistake out and it's religiously valid, I'm going to accept. I'm not going to argue with you, right? If it's a religiously valid point that you're making and we can see it, I'm going to follow it. I'm not going to just contradict the rules of the religion. I'm not, inshallah, right? This is the school. You went against the school. Here's the school. Here's the madhab. That's it. All right. Sorry. It was a mistake. I thought it was other than that. I'll fix it publicly. I have no problem with it. Now, if you're coming with an issue that's a different opinion among the scholars, some said what you said, and some said what I said, and it's in the school, in the schools, then we differ. It's not an argument. I just don't agree with you. But we're both, I'm not censoring you. The way you understood it, other scholars understood it differently, and they're valid scholars, valid positions within the school, then that's it. Now, you may try to make an issue that is not absolute. I just reject that, right? But if it is absolute, it's absolute, then you're right. If it's an issue that is scholarly difference, then there's scholarly differences, and you agree with this opinion, and that's permissible. And someone may agree with the other opinion, and that's a position, and that's valid. Long as it's within this structure of al-madhahib, the schools of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. It's cool. And it's a lot of room for that. So you don't got to make up your own stuff. There's a lot of room for differences in our madhahib, a wide range of stuff. So you don't got to make up your own stuff. You don't have to, right? You don't have to. Tayyib, may Allah reward you all. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Al-Fatiha.